So we've seen how Schillinger resultants are made and the mechanics behind them, but they may feel a little bit overwhelming and hard to know what to do with them. But there is a wonderful insight that I actually find quite inspiring about resultants, and it's this. Every rhythm you can imagine is a resultant or part of a resultant of one, two, or more numbers. I'll say that again. Any rhythm you can imagine can be constructed in this way that Schillinger proposes. So it's a sort of rhythmic DNA. Every rhythm can sort of go back to a source code. So, for example, 3/4 or 6/8 meter is a 3/1 resultant. Lower level pulse grouped in threes. And that can change. So in Leonard Bernstein's America, we hear taka ta taka ta ga ga ga. We hear those varying groupings. Or we could take the same rhythm and phase it against itself. So a simple house beat can be seen as binary rhythms displaced against themselves. These may seem quite simple, but any complex rhythm can be defined. Let's go back to our tresillo, which you should know and love, this 3/3/2 rhythm. Can you see how this rhythm could be part of a resultant? In other words, can you find a two-part simple rhythm that along the way creates this tresillo pattern? You can stop the video and try and work it out, because I'm going to give you the answer right now. So 3/3/2, this repeating pattern. You'll notice that it starts with 2 3s. So it's as if 3 is important. If it carried on, it would have another 1 on the other side of it, but it's truncated, you see. This goes 3/3/2. So it's like the 8 in red is chopping off the 3 rhythm. So you imagine a takutu gakutu gakutu gatutu and then an 8 at the same time. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. And what you get is, so we have 3 running and we have 8 running at the same time. So this is an 8/3 resultant. If we continued, it would look like this: da 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 da, and wrap around at that point. As I said, every rhythm can be described as a resultant or part of one. And there it is, the 8/3 resultant. What's interesting about this is you could use that tresillo and other portions of its longer DNA strand in your work. And this is what Schillinger was passionate about, was seeing the bigger picture, not little arbitrary fragments of musical material. And here's another one for you to work out. So in this case, we see a 3 and a 5. Obviously, 5 is bigger than 3. Sorry to break the news to you. So what could this mean? Well, if we extended that 3 to match that 5, we'd get a 2 on the other side of that border, right? So what that tells us is that we could create this 3/5 by having an 8 against the 5. So 3 5 can be created by having a repeated 5 and having an 8 that slices it. In this case, we're not in the beginning of the resultant, we're somewhere in the middle. And if we extend it out for further of this 5-8 resultant, we get 5 3 2 5 1 4 4 1 5 2 3 5. There it is, right at the end of the passage. I said that any rhythm can be expressed as part of a resultant, however complex or simple, but in fact multiple resultants can explain a single rhythm. So if you take this very simple rhythm here, so it's 3 beats at the beginning of an 8-beat cycle, you must be able to explain this somehow. So what's the solution? Well, one could be that these are all just 8-beat cycles. The magenta, blue and green are happening every 8 beats and they're phased against each other. That's a perfectly valid interpretation. But here's a creative and rather beautiful solution. If we think of them as actually starting together, so they're all started together, and then in the next cycle they're distributed like this. So the magenta is happening every 8, but the blue every 9 and the green every 10. And so it would extend further on the next cycle and further still, and would take a long time to wrap around. 360 beats, which is 45 cycles of this 8 bar, 40 of 9 and 36 of 10. 360, by the way, is the lowest common multiple of 2, 9 and 10. It's actually a little tricky to work out what they are. You don't just multiply them together. There's a number of methods for solving that. But you can, for example, have an 8, 9 and 10 bar length in Sibelius or Logic or Live, and you can see how many bars it takes to wrap around. It'll do the working out for you. We're thinking of this one rhythm here as either this or this. So let's listen to these two ways of creating that rhythm. So here are 3 notes here, magenta, blue and green, which I've given to G, E flat and D respectively. And if they're going around every 8 beats, which was our first solution, and they started together, we would get this. But they were landing on beats 1, 2 and 3, or the first, second and third of the 8-beat cycle. So we can displace them. Here are the same, and I've just displaced them by moving the start point here. So now there's our rhythm. So these are all 8-beat cycles, but phased against each other. But our final solution was a phasing solution where they start together, but one cycle is 8 beats long, one is 9 beats, and one is 10. So they'll start together, and then the second iteration will have our rhythm we recognize. We'll hear this the second time through, and then it'll continue for a long time before wrapping round again. Here we go. Creating all these cool new rhythms. and it's got a really large hypermeter. If we see it here laid out, you'll see that they drift for a phase for a long time until bar at the end of 45. That's right, after 45 repetitions, that's them all lining up again. So that's it. So what I love about this is it connects rhythms together. If you want to run rhythms like this for a long time and then choose a section of it, you can use other portions of that result and then it's connected to it in some deep and fundamental way. Furthermore, if you come up with a core rhythm and you think hard enough, you can sort of stretch it out beyond its local boundaries into its wider family of rhythms. So here are a few more ideas of Schillinger's that are fundamental and will be important later when we look at some actual pieces. So we were looking at rhythms, but here we'll look at scale and melody construction using similar techniques. So he had this idea of permutation, just like we could use a whole part of a rhythm or any portion of its larger network. We can do a similar thing with melodies and scales. So imagine we select any number of notes from a 12-tone octave. There is only one note scale with transposition. There's only one way of having one note. Now, if we were to choose any tune unit scales, there's one interval. And there are 11 scales from this perspective. So from these two notes, we're stopping here already, we calculate the possible melodic forms, the possible arrangements of these two notes. So let's pick one, C to F. So we have C, F, and FC. That's it. We can actually name these as higher level units. So if A1 and B1 are C and F, then we have a sort of higher level grouping. And we can make strings of these. So we can have CF, 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 CF and interject some FCs there. Again, this seems like a lot of work for not much payback. Here's an example of a string of these notes. Two of these A2s, A2 being C, F, and one B2. And we can realize this in a context of meters. We can have it in 3/4, which wraps around nicely, or we can have it in 4/4. Again, sort of almost mundane, but hopefully you can see the rich potential here. And we can, of course, rhythmatize it in a number of ways, as he does here. And there are other examples here with resultant patterns on the top of them. So in essence, it's creating melodic strings out of smaller components. Now, these might feel sort of mechanical and inflexible, but one of the most beautiful things in Schillinger's work is his transformations, how these little building blocks become more interesting. Now, there's a theorist called Arden who was one of the few people that know anything about Schillinger, who correlated some of Schillinger's techniques here. They can be summarized as fusion, where you join notes or rhythms together. So if we have a resultant or one of these melodic strings, we can fuse some of them together for variation. We can rotate or repeat, so that's taking various portions or changing where the beginning of the cycle is. We can leave stuff out, omission. We can group elements into phrases, and we can create subdivisions. To that, I would add the most wonderful idea of geometric expansion or geometric powers, which we'll look at later. So you just need to remember Frogg's powers. Frogg's fusion, rotation, omission, grouping, subdivision, and geometric powers. These 6 are really powerful in any compositional strategy. How are you going to remember Frogg's powers? I have no idea. So let's take this example. This string can be reduced down to a sort of melodic skeleton below, which gives phrasing. This one can be transformed through the use of omission and subdivision, the O and the S of Frogg's. And here we're using powers. You might notice that we have that CF string that's cycling against the 4/4 meter, but it's also being halved in the terms of its rhythm in the yellow, and quartered in magenta, and eighthicized in the red. And adding a harmonic transposition in the last bar, you actually start getting some music. Another concept that emerges in Schillinger's work, and that connects it to nature and mathematics, is that of nesting and fractals. This nesting is the idea of self-similarity. You can think of it as Russian dolls or fractal images. So for example, if we take this familiar AABA form, these A's and B's could be melody notes or rhythms or any musical parameter. And Schillinger's really open about all parameters in music. We can group these together into a higher level object that we can call capital A. So AABA is A. But that A could be repeated. And it can also have a next higher level structure where we have a B, which you can see as some variation of A. ABBA and BABA, 2 great bands. And that whole structure of AABA is itself another group that we can call Big A. And that A can be repeated and repeated, varied, and form another AABA group. And that process can repeat indefinitely. So this should be enough inspiration for the time being to create melodic forms and permutations, and using these Froggy transformations. And we'll look at these in the context of Schillinger's most notable students in the next section.